Good morning, everyone. Our esteemed guests. I feel extremely privileged to be here today at ISI on 2nd of November, celebrating Vigilance Awareness Week that started from the 31st of October and will continue to 6th of November. And today, on 2nd of November, we are celebrating in the spirit of this year's theme for Vigilance Awareness Week as given by the Central Vigilance Commission, Government of India, that is Corruption-Free India for Developed Nation. That is to infuse integrity among all the citizens of India and to fight collectively against the corruption to build a better and stronger nation. On this note, I would now request our Director Ma'am, Professor Shankar Bandyopadhyay, our Chief Guest, Professor Shankar Kumar Pal, Professor Kartiki V. Desai, and Shri Baba Chaudhary, our Vigilance Officer, Pavitra Bonik, to please come up here and light a lamp in front of Professor Mohanish's photo. I would now request Professor Shankar Bandyopadhyay to please come here and join us. Professor Shankar Bandyopadhyay, please come here and join us. Professor Karthiki Videsai, to please come here and join us. And our chief guest, Shri Dipankar Chaudhary, please come here and join us. And Professor Govindra Bonik, please come here and join us. I would now request Professor Govindra Bonik, Vigilance Officer ISI, to please come here and deliver his welcome.
Thank you. Good morning to everyone. I extend my warm welcome to everybody present here on the occasion to observance of Vigilance Awareness Week 2022. And this Vigilance Awareness Week, generally we observe the last week of October, commemorating the birthday of Bharat Ratna Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. So, as you know that this Vigilance Awareness Week, we have initiated this week to observe this week on 31st October. And it will be continued till 6th November. So, and as a part of it, on 31st October, we have observed the integrity pledge ceremony, and across the different centers of ISI, hundreds of workers, students have participated in this ceremony. So now, today on this occasion, I am delighted to inform you that we have with us our President of the Council, ISI Council, Professor Shankar Pal. As he is a permanent resident of Kolkata, so we have taken this opportunity to invite him, and he is kind enough to accept our invitation, and today he is with us. Thank you, sir. We are happy to announce that Sri Dipankar Chaudhary, IAS, and he is the Special Secretary, Senior Special Secretary, Home and Hill Affairs Department, Government of West Bengal, and the Secretary of Justice Lakur and Justice Bhattacharya Commission of Inquiry. So he is kind enough to accept our invitation to grace the occasion as our chief guest, and thank you, sir, for he is with us. We also have Professor Karthiki Videsai. He is the CBO of NIBMG and a very renowned researcher. So thank you, ma'am, for coming here. Our director is also here. So, and this is the occasion we are observing together as a vigilance, part of the vigilance as well as the institute. So, as you know that every year CBC observed this Vigilance Awareness Week with a special theme. So this year the theme is Corruption-Free India for a Developed Nation. So, and as a part of that, as I mentioned earlier, that we have already initiated this, initiated the Integrity Pledge occasion ceremony to observe this Vigilance Awareness Week. So, as a part of that, today we have a half-day seminar. Actually, we are interested, or we are we like to listen from our chief guest and from our guest of honors. I think our chief guest will enlighten us about the general views of vigilance and why vigilance is so important in India or any country. And I would also request our guest of honor to enlighten us about the administration and the vigilance, role of vigilance in an autonomous body, as she is belonging to an autonomous body. So now let me say a few words about the vigilance. What is vigilance? Actually, vigilance is a state of constantly being watchful of potential dangers or threats. So what are the potential dangers or threats? Particularly in one word, we can say that the potential dangers or potential or threats are if there is a loss of state, that can be considered as a potential danger or potential threats. So in our institute or in any autonomous institute, or you can say that these potential dangers or threats are the bribes, taking bribes, or corruption, or favoritism, nepotism, or errors, irregularities, all those things. So in academic institution, I don't think, or in our institution, throughout my experience, 3.5 years experience, I have seen very little cases or almost nil case of bribes. So only there are some cases which is irregularities, or you can say that the deviation from the normal rules, and that is due to the ignorance. I think so. As you know that our supreme authority, that is the director, is from an academic field. So it is not possible to her to know all the rules and regulations. So it is quite normal. So when being a vigilance officer, I have to deal all those things. I have to think about the errors. So this can be considered, all these things can be considered as the error. So one error can be considered as an error due to omission and error due to commission. So error due to commission is our main concern. That means they are intentionally doing that error. So if there is something like that, then we have to be more strict about that. And the error due to omission. So we have to cautious about that doing our day-to-day activities. There should not be any error, but it is not possible. That's why vigilance officer is needed. That's why we should have a vigilant, or we should have more vigilant, or we should have more transparent. And now I would like to say a few of my words regarding my past experience. And these words might not be pleasant to the ISA administration. So I beg the pardon for them. But whenever I dealt with the complaint referred by the CVC or CBO or received by Vigilance Office itself, I need to investigate. This is the process. During the course of investigation, I have to ask the information or papers from the administration. But I have seen maximum of the time, the administration is very much reluctant to share the information. I don't know why. Sometimes they told me that there is a question of confidentiality. I don't know what is more confidential than the vigilance. So in future, I'm not sure. I don't know whether I will be here or not, but I think in future, the institute, to maintain its transparency. I know that ISI is more transparent than other institutes. I have a lot of examples. I can cite any institution's name, but I don't like to linger my sentence because there are several speakers. So we would like to hear from them. And finally, I would like to say, I would also like to thank all of you to come here to spend your time so that it will be a great success. Thank you all.
I would now request our Director, Ma'am, Professor Shankar to please come here and address a few words.
Thank you very much. A very good morning to all of you. Shri Dipankar Chaudhary, the chief guest of today's program, Professor Kartiki V. Desai, the guest of honor, the president of the Indian Statistical Institute, Professor Shankar Pal, and our part-time vigilance officer, Professor Povitra Bonik, and all my colleagues, students, workers, all who have joined today's program. This is an important exercise for any institution, including ours. The Vigilance Awareness Week started on 31st October, and as Professor Pavitra Bonik already pointed out, this happens to be the birthday of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, who was the first Deputy Prime Minister as well as the first Home Minister in a very, very critical time of the country, 1947 to 1950. His contributions to the development of the country, to the integration of the country, is unparalleled. Of course, just a piece of information, he was born in 31st October 1875 and he lived up to 15 December 1950. So something is the problem with this mic, right? Anyhow, so we are therefore celebrating this Vigilance Awareness Week, and the theme is Corruption-Free India for a Developed Nation. No nation can be developed unless it's corruption free, or at least corruption controlled to a very, very large extent. A corrupt nation cannot be a developed nation, can never be a developed nation. That is true for even the smallest unit of the society, the family, the individual. A corrupt individual can never create a corruption-free family. Corruption-free family can never create a corruption-free society or a corruption-free institution. And I believe one thing which Professor Bonik already pointed out, that vigilance. Am I audible at the end? Yes, because I have brought up a son, so my voice is naturally very loud. So anyhow, corruption, so as Professor Bonik pointed out, that vigilance, this particular word means constantly being on the lookout. Now, I have one issue here. If we are constantly on the lookout for things going wrong, then when do we work? We are constantly looking for things that have gone wrong. So when do we actually do what is needed to be done? And when things happen, it is when mistakes happen. So it is very important for all of us to distinguish between a vigilance activity and a mistake, and also whether the mistake was an honest mistake or an intentional thing, which one is covering up at a later point of time in the garb of an honest mistake. So these things have to be distinguished, and it needs, I believe, a lot of understanding, a lot of experience to distinguish, because the lines dividing these areas are very thin, are very difficult to pinpoint. It is through a lot of experience, through a lot of application of judgment, that these things can be distinguished. And what has happened, and I really thank Professor Bonik. Indeed, he has pointed out that often he has faced difficulties in his activity. It is, of course, for all of us to ensure that such difficulties, whatever has been faced, may have been faced for a number of reasons, but in future, these things are tackled, these things are handled, facilitated as far as possible, and that we work in an environment of trust and faith. So one thing which also I want to bring out is from past documents, when we have been looking at how the position of the vigilance officer came into being in this institution, we see that the institute asked for a chief vigilance officer, probably a separate post, but that did not happen. The government approved a part-time chief vigilance officer of the institute, and to be nominated from among eligible workers of the institute. That position, probably we called it part-time vigilance officer. Professor Bonik can correct me if I'm wrong. We called it part-time vigilance officer, but we were always operating with the understanding that the part-time vigilance officer was the part-time chief vigilance officer of the institution. Of late, we have been told, and we have been intimated that that probably is not the case. The part-time vigilance officer of the institution is a wing of the chief vigilance officer of the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. This probably needs a rethink, because Professor Desai can tell me, Professor Desai's institution, NIBMG, is a reasonably small institution, number of faculty members is of the order of in the tens, like 16, I think. So that has a chief vigilance officer, part-time, naturally part-time, because you're doing your work, you're doing your science, a part-time chief vigilance officer. But ISI, such a big institution, it's not a small institution anymore. By any sense, we can not call it it's a medium-sized institution. That is lacking a chief vigilance officer, part-time again. It is something that we need to address. I have been trying to raise this issue. It has not borne fruit yet, but I'm sure we will be able to handle this, and we will get a chief vigilance officer on a part-time basis of the institution. And that is necessary because otherwise, you see, when complaints come, then because of the current situation, it is taking a lot of time to be addressed, to get resolved, because it is going through multiple levels. So that is where, because you see, when a vigilance complaint comes, whoever is named in that vigilance complaint, there is a stigma attached to it. Whether we like it or not, there is a stigma attached to it. If there is something wrong which has happened, yes, punish. But if not corruption there, then that stigma needs to be cleared as quickly as possible. So that is where we need to take things fast. This is a particular area where we can, even if one can say it is not a punishment or anything, but still there is a social stigma. So one should be made free of that social stigma as soon as possible if the person has not really indulged in any corruption. So these things need to be handled and tackled. And overall, I think vigilance is a way of life. And for making India vigilant, corruption free, we have to go to the root of it, which is education. It's only through proper education which instills a sense of integrity, a sense of value in the individual. Can later on we can get individuals who will not indulge in corrupt activities, who will not buy a ticket, who will buy a ticket even if the ticket collector is not there, who will not do things only because somebody will pull him or her up. If that person is not doing something which is right, that person will do what is right naturally. So that has to come through education, and that cannot come overnight. That will take time, but we know there's a huge amount of corruption which has to be tackled at the moment from both angles. So two-pronged approach. At the top, by enough punitive action, at the bottom, through enough education, through enough learning, through good ways of learning, we have to tackle this problem. Just a piece of statistics, we are in Indian Statistical Institute, so I cannot help but tell some numbers. I was just looking up on a particular site called www.transparency.org, which has, it's called CPI, Corruption Perception Index. And from 2015 to 2021, the index is there. Denmark, New Zealand, and Finland have mostly been the top 3 countries, rank 1 in this list. India has been in 2015 at rank 76, 2016 79, 2017 81, 2018 78, 2019 80, 2020 86, 2021 85. So India has not done very well. We can see that, and things have not improved significantly over the last 6-7 years at least. But a lot of instruments have now come to the hands of the common people who can raise issues. Many important issues get raised through these different instruments like the RTIs and the vigilance complaints, the Prime Minister's grievance portal, etc. But it's also, I think, institutions like ours, old institutions, they can also vouch that many times these instruments are also being misused, is also used for settling personal grudges, personal grievances, and personal, because somebody has not got something, therefore use these instruments to settle. That also needs to be protected so that people are not harassed. With those few words, I thank Professor Bonik for organizing this program, and also thank him for handling the very important office of the Vigilance section of the Indian Statistical Institute. And I thank all of you for having come here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for this word. Next, I would like to call Professor Shankar Kepal, President of ISI Council. He is the former director of ISI and was awarded Padma Shri in the year of 2013 and worked enormously in the field of soft computing, fuzzy neural network, and machine intelligence. Sir, please come here and say a few words to the audience and our guests.
Good morning, everybody. I'm just glad to see here our director, Professor Sangamita Bandyopadhyay, our vigilance officer, Professor Pavitra Bonik, and our two distinguished speakers, Professor Desai and IAS officer, Mr. Chaudhary. Now, I've been sharing this kind of days of our institute since 2010. So for the past 12 years, I don't think I have shared any kind of this kind of activities of ISI. So when Professor Pavitra Bonik requested me 2 days back, I was a little bit reluctant. But again, he said, no, sir, you come. You say about 2 or 3 hours. So I had gone through this Google search because vigilance work was a little bit scary to me. When I was young, when we watched a movie, Sonnasi Raja, Bengali. So there was some vigilance because of the hero Uttam Kumar was killed by his doctor, etc. So that time since vigilance, now we are seeing CBI, intelligence branch. The last month I got a phone call from intelligence branch. So I was first of all scared. Why intelligence branch after me? So really I was scared. So then I say, why are you coming to me? I'm just not the director. I'm just not the executive power also. Well, no, sir, don't worry. We are coming for some technological help. So I have this number with him. So vigilance, as I see, it's practically paying careful attention to notify, to locate any kind of possible danger out of any happenings. Of course, it's misdeeds. And as our director mentioned, it is 31st October, the week when this 35th of October falls, that is the week we just celebrate. And Central Vigilance Commission Act came into effect from 11th September 2003. And as she mentioned, it is the birthday of Bharat Ratna. So when the name of Bharat Ratna Sardar Patel is associated, so it must have some kind of significance to our national development. Corruption-free India, that is a very proverb. We have been listening for the last 40 years, 50 years. Corruption-free family, corrupted man, corrupted minister, corrupted chief minister. They are all now putting in the jail. You are just seeing in Bengal. So nobody likes corruption. But whether like or not, you get involved, knowingly or unknowingly, without knowing rules. Particularly, this is our institute. We are all academicians. We all run after publications, patents, awards, class teaching, national recognition, international recognition. And our director comes from that. We do not have director from IAS or IPS. There are many universities who have their vice chancellors from IAS. I know, from Odisha particularly. So it is natural. Now I remember during my tenure as director, 2005 to 2010, vigilance came into our ISI. We had a request. I think it is 2007 or 8. So that time we had appointed one of our colleagues, I remember. But that time we did not even vigilance case much. 1 or 2 I remember. But today I see there are so many vigilance cases. Maybe it is true for all over our country. Maybe another reason, that time not many corruption was there, or could be that time we did not have same kind some kind of monitoring facility that we have now in order to look at those corruptions. Or maybe sometimes we have ignored some things. But today, the situation is different. Same people, maybe next generation have come to our institute for the last 12 years. But when I listen from our colleagues that vigilance case is coming, in his name, vigilance case is going on. As our director mentioned, it is a kind of social stigma. Whether you are proved or not, that is different issue. It's kind of social stigma. And obviously, it's a stigma on our institute. And it's an institute of national importance. And now it has become an index also. Just like our publication, which have H index, impact factor. For an institute, it is also a kind of index. Index in the sense, if you have larger number of cases, that means your admission is poor. Poor in terms of transparency, poor in terms of integration, efficiency, publicity. So I think here comes the role of our vigilance officer to take care of these issues. Now, Central Vigilance Commission is an autonomous body. And I think so our vigilance officer also. So I will request our vigilance officer to work independently, and I will request our administration not to interfere in his or her activities. And at the same time, I will request the vigilance officer, whoever be he or she should be honest and should be unbiased in just communicating the opinion upwards. So with this one, I thank Professor Bonik for inviting me, but I am a little surprised. It was made, this Vigilance Week is made for increasing the public awareness. Public awareness regarding the possible faults, possible danger out of any kind of corruption. But I'm not seeing here our officers, our just faculty members, our workers. So please make sure the next time we organize, it has some meaning. Otherwise, it's not just only just few people, director and deputy director and so on, some other officer, because it is a just integrated system comprising all levels of work. So my request is that next time, if I'm there, I will want to see that more participation from our institute. Okay, so with this, I like to thank you again. Thanks for listening to me, and thanks for giving some opportunity to share a few words. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I would now like to call Professor Kartiki V. Desai, Chief Vigilance Officer, National Institute of Biomedical Genomics, to please come here and say a few words. Professor Desai works profusely in the field of cancer research.
So good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me. This also made me seriously think about the vigilance that we're doing at NIBMG for the first time, I must say, because I had to come up with a way of communicating what we're doing as an autonomous institute. And I also thank you, Professor Bonik, for inviting me, and also ma'am for engaging with me in the morning today. So actually, like a true scientist, I came with a set of slides, but I can address just like that. So one of the things which many people have touched upon, you know why the week is there.
If you want, you can.
I can, because some points. First, can I get? Okay. Can I use this computer to put the slides up? Directly. Can I help you? Yeah, I think, you know, it's like this thing is that every time it is the other way. It's all. Yeah. I think I can open directly from. Okay. Disconnected. Wait. Okay, that's good. So I think this is
Yeah. Okay.
okay. That's good. Well, my apologies to disturb the piece a little bit, but I took it quite seriously, the whole thing. And like I said, I'm very happy to be invited, and also apologize for my throat. It's a bit off today. So as suggested by Professor Banik, he wanted to talk about the role of a vigilance officer in an autonomous institution. And as Professor Sengupta, our director, has told us, we are a much smaller institute. So for us, vigilance is very small, and it's very different from ISI. So what I will try to do is just introduce NIBMG. Many of you have visited NIBMG, and those of you who have not, please do come visit us. We are a small institute in Kalyani, and we, as the name suggests, and of course you know Parthoda, so you are very well versed with the founder director of this institution, who's also a member of ISI. Do you know who this is? Yeah. Aryan Khan. So you would wonder, because the theme is topic is corruption, anti-corruption for this awareness week, and immediately we think that okay, his movie is coming, the next movie is coming where he's starring, and then he's going to become the hero and destroy the corruption, and that's the theme of thing. But that's not why I brought Aryan Khan up over here, because if you remember, he got entangled in a case of a Mumbai's rave party case, which was a luxury cruise ship, and he was accused of possessing drugs with the intent to distribute, which is a major offense if you think about it. And then, of course, first it was called the Mumbai's rave party case, and the media got all over it. And because it is SRK's son, it was retitled as Aryan Khan drug case. So all the others kind of went into the passive, and he became the prominent person over there. He was denied bail, and all kinds of things happened. But the reason I brought this up, because this is where vigilance comes into the legal world, and then it also gains an important, even in a big case like this, which was a criminal case, because somebody over there suggested that there was a request of a bribe or extortion of money from Aryan Khan, and then the Narcotics Control Bureau got involved. Their vigilance team got involved, and they set up a committee for investigation. So what ended up happening in this case is there were witnesses who claimed of hearing a request of a 25 crore demand from the investigating officers who investigated the case. The committee interviewed, which is a vigilance committee actually, interviewed more than 65 witnesses. They gave a report of more than 3,000 pages of all the investing. They kind of suggested that the investigation was not complete. There was no videography. Some of the witnesses were not questioned. Some were pressurized to answer some questions, so on and so forth. And ultimately, that vigilance committee suggested punitive measures. And if you remember, 7 or 8 officials were named, and it was suggested that they. So it's not changing.
No, that is off.
Okay, great. They suggested punitive measures. So they actually said that legally they should be prosecuted, and there were a lot of transfers and loss of jobs and things. So right from a legal aspect, we came into vigilance, and here the vigilance committee actually suggested, and he was let off because of lack of evidence or sufficient evidence to hold him against the thing. So sometimes the vigilance can come in at such a powerful note and overturn what was happening in a situation. So many of us have defined vigilance, and as a biologist, I'll define it in a slightly different way from a paper. So we've already heard that vigilance is defined as action or state of keeping careful watch for possible danger or difficulties. So this I've taken from a paper just to explain what low and high vigilance actually means. So now you see, as urbanization takes place, there are these rabbits and hares which come into the urban system, and they have to adapt to many different things. First, they had a predator which was a coyote, but now it is faced with multiple dangers in the city. So this can rank the idea of vigilance over here. For the hare or the rabbit, there is very low danger from a human being, because we are not the predator-prey relationship with the hares, but it is afraid because we are a big organism and we can do. Now think about the pet dogs. They are going to chase the hares or the rabbits just for the sake of sport. So they have to be more vigilant about the presence of dogs around, and they are vigilant about human beings, and that's the perceived threat. So you have to have a ranking of vigilance when you think about it. And if there's a coyote which is a predator, it has to be at its highest vigilance. So this is something that we are trying to do in institutions, depending on where we are at. We might have small problems or big problems, but we have to be vigilant, and we should be able to categorize the risk we have, or how there is a difference. And that is exactly what ma'am and sir were pointing out, that it might be an error of judgment, or it might be an honest mistake. So we should be able to distinguish that from a serious offense that is created by a person intentionally. So our vigilance accordingly has to be comprised of all these things. We should be aware of finding, we should be vigilant, but low response probably to something which is an honest mistake and a serious offense. And this, as you suggested, is a very fine line. Nevertheless, as you know, the Act was made in 2003, and it was established, and the Act said that a separate Vigilance Commission should be set up that is independent of all ministries. It is not under the control of any ministry. It is independent, and we have talked about independence, and our president sir also pointed out that the vigilance officer has to be independent in thought, and all the support should be extended to him. So the role of CVO in an academic institution is very different from, say, a public sector company or a private sector company, because their challenges or problems are very different. For a CVO of an academic institution, I would say the job is slightly easier, because what the CVO needs to do is to aid the administration and maintains the rules, regulations, and systems in the organization, such that we project honesty and integrity in our work. The CVO also, as you are aware, receives complaints and also particularly vigilance-related complaints, and it also guides the community and tells, like we hold awareness weeks or something, and make the community aware of what vigilance is all about, and what is corruption, what is not corruption, what needs to be transparent, so on and so forth. And they also help in streamlining procedures of the institute. Sometimes you have old and new, so you need to streamline some procedure. When some person misuses a loophole in some system, the vigilance officer has to step in and make sure that loophole is glossed over, so that that event does not occur again. So overall, the vigilance officer has to encourage a culture of integrity on particularly the academic campus which is present. So the vigilance angle generally comes in when there is accepting of gifts or demanding bribes, which we talked about, or that is very obvious. If you have, even if you, as in a position of power, if you have undue influence, for example, during recruitment or during giving tenders, or particularly by listing vendors for certain instruments that you buy, which is like a very academic activity, then they also come under the purview of vigilance if there is violation of rules. And of course, some companies always tell you, oh, if you buy from me, I'll give you an iPhone or some much bigger kind of gift. So as government officials, we are not supposed to take any gifts and favor anybody. We have to be very transparent about what we do. The fourth thing that you can judge as a vigilance officer is whether position of assets that the person has is disproportionate to the income. That is a pointer when the vigilance officer is monitoring to know that it's not possible for a person with this much income to have these kind of assets unless they were inherited and there is some policy. So this is also has a vigilance angle if the assets are disproportionate. Some things that we don't often think about is willful negligence, even willful negligence on the part of authorities when they know that something shoddy is going on is also has a vigilance angle. So people might complain against the senior officials also about such things, or even recklessness in decision making. Sometimes people just bully and pass the decision. Maybe it is because of time or whatever reasons that are there, or just as a personal thing, they push some decisions through. They also come under the purview of a vigilance officer in an academic institution, or excessive discrimination when you let people go knowing that they are flouting the rules a little bit or they are borderline. That also comes under this. And of course, violation of system and procedures, we all know, comes in that. So the functions of the vigilance department generally are divided into three. Preventive vigilance, punitive vigilance, and surveillance and detection. So the vigilance officer kind of has to take care of all these three aspects. So it's a huge thing to do. So what I will touch upon is the punitive part of it, because we always think that punishment is good. So I don't want you to read the slide. I just want to say that if an institute generally projects itself as one which is driving punitive vigilance, it has its work cut out for it. Because generally a vigilant complaint has to be given in written, signed, and you have to know the person. Generally a CVO will not engage complaints from whistleblowers or anyone which are not signed. They have to be authored by the person. You cannot give a complaint and then vigilance officer will not follow it. And once the complaint comes in, the CVO has to establish a committee and an inquiry officer and a group of people to really find out and investigate what happens. And all these things, as you are aware, sir, there's a huge amount of paperwork and a huge amount of resources going to it. And this is just one page of what the vigilance officer has to do. If I'll enumerate all of them, it's going to be 3 pages worth of slides. So that much carefully you have to manage the system and really investigate so that, as ma'am mentioned, the person who is accused is not guilty. Because that person may not have done anything at all. So you have to protect that person. You have to also protect the complainant, because there should be no bias against that person for bringing out, because if he's a true whistleblower, then that person also needs to be respected. And as everyone mentioned, it's a fine line to figure out what is what. And these investigations are very, very difficult to do unless there is an obvious recording or something which somebody can use as evidence. Otherwise, if it's hearsay and word of mouth, it's very difficult to make a decision. Nevertheless, what happens in our cases in academic institutions, the things involved are much more minor than, say, a private institution or a public sector company, because a lot of monetary loss is there in institutions where this kind of bribery or corruption occurs. For academic institutions, it's much minor. The whole offense is pretty lower level of offenses. So the penalties tend to be also minor. So the penalties could be that I've listed over here, could be censure, or you can withhold the promotion, or you could recover from pay if it is a small amount of loss that has occurred due to negligence of that person or breach of some kind of orders that were given to that person, or you can withhold increments of pay. And very rarely we have come across in incidences, I also searched for academic institutions where there has actually been a vigilance case in when there is a direct compulsory retirement or dismissal. So which is what sir was saying, that a lot of times the scientists tend to be honest, and the surrounding people tend to be honest, and they have a lot of integrity. Generally, academic institutions don't go into this kind. So in some ways, our job becomes slightly easier because of that. So for the punitive vigilance, detection and surveillance, a huge amount of resources have to go in from that institution. They are not only resources in terms of money, but in terms of people and their time. 2 to 3 months is just to form the committees, and then the committee will investigate and they will document every bit of paper, and the decision-making process takes about 7 to 8 months because of the difficulties. So almost 10 to 11 months are spent in one vigilance case determination. And the gain from that are punishments which are rarely severe. So somehow in smaller institutions, you have to balance how punitive vigilance you want to really enforce versus how much time is really being spent and how many resources are being spent if the financial loss is much lower and so on. And a lot of times if you read articles upon the thing, a lot of times the thing is honest mistake. And people also identify something which is called a type of person in vigilance. That person tends to be the one who wants to do personal gains. They rarely think of the intent, and it's a type of person. And that type of person, finding that actually only that type of person deserves monitoring. So for surveillance and detection, you hardly have a few individuals that are roaming around over there. So usually what happens is in smaller institutions, we tend to not take punitive action. And if we do, it is usually to set an example or set a precedent so that it gives like a warning signal that, okay, there is a commission which is going to kind of investigate you and so on and so forth. So they don't really drive this. But if you go to bigger companies or even RBI, there's a really nice article at the RBI site, which talks about how to set up a vigilance office in bigger companies. And there they really do nice equations about cost benefit and how what is the personal gain is more important or the gain of the company is more important. So I found that very interesting. And if you like equations and that, you can definitely go over there. So now we come back to this problem of an autonomous institution and then a department of anything, you can say telecommunications or railways or roadway or whatever it is. Over there, it's the secretary or chief, and after that is the chief vigilance officer. And then all the directors are under that. And it's a huge system. And as people have rightly pointed out, the appointment of the chief vigilance officer is external. That person is not a member of the institution because there should be no conflict of interest, which actually we deal a lot when we are institutional CBOs. So that has to be a completely separate thing which reports to the, and there should be no pressure on that individual to make any decisions to do that. And that is a very big machine over there. If you come to autonomous institutions like ours, so if I am the chief vigilance officer, I'm actually by nature a scientist and a breast cancer researcher. Okay, so usually they pick a senior member from the faculty with some experience in administration, but your duties are teaching, research, exams, so many committees, warden. You know, there are so many things that come with an institution which you think. There are a huge number of jobs in the institution. So imagine if everything is punitive and your goal as an institution to always work on punitive vigilance. It's just impossible for a CEO to really go through that. But that doesn't mean, that's not a counter argument to suggest that you should have no vigilance. By no way, that is what I'm saying. Because there is a counter argument. What people have shown, this is a theory of, which is called a theory of broken windows. So a long time ago, the idea is that if you have somebody pelts a stone at a window and breaks it, if you replace it, it's okay. If you don't replace it, people think it is okay to throw stones at the window and they'll break panes for fun. In the end, you're not going to have any windows which are intact. So this is the theory of broken windows. So you need to fix it. That means even if there's a minor infarction, there's a minor problem in the institution, it needs to be fixed. Otherwise, nobody's going to listen to you in the end. And from a small small bribe or a small thing is going to blow up, and it's going to be a huge corruption problem in the institution. So we do have to find the balance. And this theory of broken window was very well used by this person who came into prominence called William Bratton. What he did was in the New York, when the crime rates were so high that people would come to clean your windshields and at gunpoint relieve you of all your possessions. And if you didn't give them what they want, they would probably even shoot you for the $5 you have in your pocket. And it was abysmal amount of crime in New York City. And at that time, all the resources from the mayor Giuliani were going through major cases. And there were no resources left to protect the Aam Janta or the Aam Admi, who was facing these problems every day. And he was the first time who proposed a theory that you get rid of put all the resources in getting rid of the smaller offenses. Automatically, those people, they're reprimanded and they're punished. They're not going to escalate to major offenses. And he actually could show over years that overall the crime rate decreased when you just were punitive about the smaller offenses and you caught them much earlier. So the idea that to take home for us is that you have to prevent the smaller vigilance violations so that eventually, like ma'am said, you will have no problems in the institution. So as if you see the CBC website and so on and so forth, and if you read some of their documents, what people have realized that the punitive vigilance is not going anywhere. It is really not reversing the level of corruption. But the idea, prevention is better than cure. So preventive vigilance, which I mentioned the first, might be where we want to put a lot of resources as an institution, particularly as an academic or smaller institutions, because the CBOs can take simple measures which will like we do an awareness program, we train the faculty, or we let people know actually what it means is what is a bribe, that everyone knows, but what is a violation of a procedure that people need to know. If they know the procedure, they can, like we were discussing, they can understand the violation. At times, if they don't know the process, it's very difficult for them to even judge, oh, this is a vigilance problem that is coming up. So if we can go back as vigilance officer, look at all the rules and procedures in the organization, find the loopholes, and if we can plug them, it is going to be preventive vigilance. We might have fewer and fewer cases coming across. There might be some sensitive corruption spots where, generally people might be going offline a little bit to make some personal gain out of it. We can plug that in. So I think the CVO and academic institutions, rather than spending time in people, can actually go into the administration with, of course, the support of the administration and try to tweak a few things. So in a smaller organizations like ours, where we don't have yet set principles, because you are a much older institution, it's very hard to change anything. I find it much easier and it's much more transparent. Also, by the nature of my job, I'm also on some committees, some other committees. So I get to see all the documents, if not as a CVO, as a person on some other committee. So the documents are, so both things are happening at the same time because we are sharing jobs, basically, which decreases as your institution becomes bigger and bigger. A simple way to conduct of rules you can do for just know the annual property returns of the people. That can be easily checked. You can make a system in which if people get gifts, they declare the gifts. There should be no fear. If they get gifts like a small thing from a company, sometimes they give to the students some small thing. If that is declared, it should not be a vigilance complaint against it because it is declared. Of course, the Benami transactions and also vendors, if they're relatives and employed in private firms, we have to make sure that the business doesn't go to some relative from the institutions. And I think most importantly, nowadays, because of this Vigilance Awareness Week, we've started taking training and giving seminars much more seriously. I remember 3-4 years back, there was nothing, we never celebrated this. And I think it's a very good advancement for institutions because that also is a platform where we can get together and communicate many things and across institutions also. So I would like to stop there. And I would say in my experience, if you see, without trivializing the concept of vigilance, I would say for an autonomous institute like NIBMG, I'm almost like a watchful grandmother. You are very benign towards everyone. Because what you've done is over the years, you have taught the principles. You have imparted the concept of integrity. You have sensitized people when they came to you. So they are like, you've taught them in many ways. So you could be a teacher or a grandmother. And most of my time, frankly, we have very few, hardly any complaint. In fact, we have received for vigilance, not during my tenure. Mostly, I get to give mithai to people like the grandmother because I get to certify that there are no vigilance cases pending against this person who's applying for a higher post or applying for promotion. So I'm very happy about that too. But I know that we are a smaller institution. So with that thought of vigilance and being autonomous institution, I will end what I wanted to say over here. And I thank you very much.
Now I would request our chief guest, Shri Dipankar Chaudhary, IAS, Senior Special Secretary, Home and Heal Affairs Department, Government of West Bengal, and Secretary, Justice Logur and Justice Bhattacharya, Commission of Inquiry, to please come here and say a few words to our audience and our guests.
Before anything, let me unmask. So, good afternoon. All good wishes for the festive season that is on. and of the days ahead. In fact, when Professor Bonik intimated that you are going to be the chief guest of the observance of Vigilance Awareness Week, this very word vigilance somewhat is intimidating to an ordinary individual. If you take the common perception. And my first interaction with such an intimidating word was almost 30 years back, when accidentally an officer of the CBI entered my room and said, "I am from the CBI." So I was just 7 or 8 months old in the service. And I was almost the spine, the cold shiver ran that why the CBI is in my chamber. So actually he lost his way in the collectorate. He wanted to meet the additional district magistrate who was in charge of general administrative affairs. And he lost his way and found somewhat a younger person than him, sitting in a chamber all alone, reading a statesman a few days old, because that was in Darjeeling when the regular daily used to reach about 48 hours late. So that was the first experience, and it was not a happy one at all. Now I rejoice, but at that time, at that particular moment, I was quite nervous. It's almost like the excitement when you go to Ranthambore with the expectation of watching the tiger. And once he or she comes very near to your jeep, you find no other way to run. It's like that. Later on, you enjoy it. But why such? Why do we get intimidated at the very word of vigilance? I think within this walls, it is because the way you implement it, the way you exercise it, it is, you remember one former chief election commissioner saying that I'm the watchdog of democracy. And when there were some disparaging remarks about that, he said that not only bark, I also bite. So keeping the barking and the biting aspects, I think it is more the way you implement the vigilance procedures and the methods that keep the normal perception slightly disturbed. But let us come to the theme, this corruption-free India for a developed nation. Especially it is significant when currently we are celebrating 75 years of independence. And just a bit of history. I'll just move from present to past if it is not boring for you. That the Prevention of Corruption Act was the very second act after the country got independence. It was enacted in 1947 itself. And if you go through the papers, it is Act 2 of 1947. So immediately, that is much before, see, when the Constitution came to be adopted. That was in 1950. But the Prevention of Corruption Act dates back to 1947. Till 2021, we have had many amendments to it, additions, alterations, extensions, expansions. But the element of corruption was eating into the society and to a new nation, which was focusing from a regulatory setup to a developmental setup. They thought at that time that prevention of corruption was necessary. And to quote Mahatma Gandhi, these very important words that it was his observation. Corruption and hypocrisy ought not to be inevitable products of democracy, as they undoubtedly are today. Now, this was a remark sometime in the 1940s. And you find its relevance even in 2022, because when you go through, as Madam Director pointed out, the corruption perception index, the larger democracies are not in a very comfortable position so far as this corruption perception is concerned. For us, we are the largest exercising democracy, and our position has been 76 to 86. This has been our drifting. This has been our position for the last 7-8 years. Now, this is not at all encouraging. And what are the aspects that the corruption perception index takes into consideration? First thing is bribery. These are the parameters on which this index is. When you are lower down in score, you are bad. The higher you go up. Diversion of public funds. This is another aspect on which this index is prepared. Third, it comes to us directly. Officials using office for private gain without facing consequence. You're going scot-free. And this is where comes another important observation when we as students have gone through, and almost all of us are aware of it. Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Now, this was an observation by Lord Acton way back in 1887 when he was corresponding with Bishop Creighton. But these words came into the public domain as late as 1907, after he passed away in 1902, when his works were published. Then in the month of April 1887, he wrote this letter, and there he cited 2 examples where to support his view that power corrupts, tends to corrupt. Now, you have to be very careful, the words. Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. The first example was the papal prowess in the Middle Ages, when, for an independent viewpoint, you could inquisition, the Spanish system of inquisition. And we know that Giordano Bruno was burned alive because the Catholic theocracy did not endorse the scientific views of Giordano Bruno. And also for Galileo's, he had to accept, he had to go back, retract from what he had observed, just to save his own life. So this was one example which Lord Acton had cited as an example where power tends to corrupt and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And the second example which he cited was the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots by Queen Elizabeth I. At what time? Now, there is a paradox, because Queen Elizabeth I was a Protestant. She succeeded a Roman Catholic believer, her elder sister, and Mary, Queen of Scots, was a Roman Catholic by religion. Now, in order to reverse the order of the day, that Roman Catholics were having the command over the society and over the monarchy, here was an example where the Protestant queen puts a Roman Catholic queen under execution only to display her might. And that time, after the Spanish Armada has been thoroughly beaten in the Battle of Seas, the command of Elizabeth I over the seas and over the domain was almost absolute. So this was the second example which Lord Acton had cited in this famous letter of his. And from there we come to a very something which we always perceive, and we understand also that whenever you give absolutism to any element, to any objective, it becomes or it tends to corrupt. Because what is corruption? Corruption is an impairment of integrity. Anything which deviates you from what is correct, that is corruption. That which debases you, that which devalues, that is corruption. And when the power is absolute, when you think like all oligarchies, monarchies, they did not survive is because there was this humongous corruption when power was absolute. So that is where when we come to the Indian context, our constitution is a brilliant example to check corruption. Because the three arms, the legislature, the judiciary, and the executive, all are subject to the provisions of the constitution. What in America they say, United States Constitution, they say it as the principle of checks and balances. No authority is absolute. Where the Senate can veto a directive of the president, where a resolution passed by the Senate can be declared as ultra vires by the Supreme Court, and where the appointment to the Supreme Court is again determined by the Senate and by the president. So they are interlinked. And perhaps because of that, we could witness one of the former presidents in front of millions and billions stating after an act of commission that he was not worthy of it, of the seat of presidency of the United States. That is where the principle of checks and balances come. And our constitution provides that. Because although there has been no such instance, but the judges of Supreme Court, at least there are two examples when they had to face the parliament prior to the provision of impeachment. None of them were impeached because both of them resigned before the impeachment proceedings could further proceed. But there is a warning. And that is how the Departmental Proceedings Act also, enacted in 1973, the first provision is, as Professor Desai was saying, is censure. When somebody is caught, when the article of charges brought before that person are proved, and suppose what is the offense that he made? Perhaps he opined to an electronic media, or perhaps his opinion was recorded in a newspaper. And maybe there the element of doubt, what we in cricketing parlance say the benefit of doubt. Now that the third umpire has come, there's no benefit of doubt to the bowler, batsman. But previously, there used to be the benefit of doubt when the batsman was given the benefit of doubt to any appeal made for his dismissal. So here again, the departmental proceedings, when it is drawn and the article of charges are proved, the first measure is censure. What is censure? It is simple, a warning to that person. It is not recorded in his service book also, but the person is given a warning in a form of a government correspondence that he should not repeat it. So there also you see, as Madam Director had said earlier, that there is, you have to see both ends, that the person who is being penalized is not discouraged to continue in his endeavor. At the same time, he should be made to know that this is the limit and no further. But once you bring him down to 2 levels of seniority or take punitive measures, you discourage him. I had the opportunity of working with a very senior member of the Indian Administrative Service in his capacity as Principal Secretary in the Personnel and Administrative Reforms Department. Now, he had a different approach to those against whom such article of charges were being processed or who was sent to compulsory waiting. He said that put them to work, because after 6 months, of suspension, you go back to your pay scale. 6 months you face a punitive measure, but if the article of charges are not proved, then after that you come back to your basic pay structure. And the inquiry continues. The inquiring authority goes on with his work or her work, and there is difference of opinion between the inquiring authority and the disciplinary authority, but the person is out of job. So this gentleman, he said that don't do that. Once the period of suspension is over, let that person work as we have in the All India Service Rules. Unless the charges are proved, you are made to continue. So the human resource of which we are in scarce is not wasted. Now, this is another way of exercising the principle of checks and balance. That person is not, what you said very clearly and very, that's a realistic way, that the stigma continues, because these days of media and limelight hogging onto you, once an allegation is brought, it is widespread. Everybody says that, oh, he has done this. Once he is absolved of these charges, no one reports. No one reports. Whether the person's body mass index has gone down, that also comes to the fore. But if that person is proved as not guilty, you will not see it in the headlines, unless and until his being guilty was in the headlines. So this is where the element of stigma, why the cold shiver ran through my spine when that gentleman entered and said, I am from CBI. So this is the way, this intimidating way of saying. And then you find the superiors saying to the subordinates, I'll see you. In Bengali, I think all of we somewhat we can follow English. Dekhe nebo, we say, we sometimes say, okay, you have done this to me. So instead of what they said in Jolly LLB Part 2, that see you in court, we say dekhe nebo. Now I'll just make a digression. It was from a story of Premankur Atarthi, where two gangs of North Calcutta, they were fighting with each other. And one group was threatening the other that this is nothing. Next time when we meet, I'll show you the wedding of your elder brother. Dadar biye dekhiye do. And then the clashes continue. And in one such clash, almost half a dozen members of each gang have their limbs broken, their faces, the geography rather disturbed. And even then, when they were carrying them by stretcher, one was threatening the other that this is nothing. Next time when we meet, I'll show you the wedding of your elder brother. So Premankur Atarthi remarks that if this is not the wedding, then when will the wedding happen? So this intimidating approach in the way in which disciplinary proceedings or departmental proceedings are handled, that makes the common person a very frightened one. Before he could do anything, perhaps he is subject to a number of physiological disorders because of that. So we have to be very careful how to use. You have the rod in your hand. You have to use it, but not so frequently that the child becomes a criminal. Not that. If you spare the rod, you may spoil the child, but that does not mean that you use the rod so frequently that the child is spoiled forever. So in order to curb corruption, I think all of you may agree that to have a corruption-free society is very, very difficult. It's rather an utopia. Once we are in 2022, corruption-free society may be an utopia, but you can curb corruption. Out of 180 nations on which this Transparency International, they are working. And there's a very interesting remark which the present CEO of Transparency International has made recently. And it will only strengthen the perception in which we are talking. In authoritarian contexts where control rests with a few, social movements are the last remaining checks on power. It is the second part is more relevant. It is the collective power held by ordinary people from all walks of life. Recent what happened in Sri Lanka. All walks of life that will ultimately deliver accountability. And this is the part where the authorities have to be very clear. They are accountable. I heard an experience of one of my colleagues. He was a student in the Delhi School of Economics. Now, when they used to take French leave, they used to travel by two classes. One was the express class and the other was the Janta class. Now, what is the express class? You have the ticket, you don't have the reservation. So you take the Indian Express, place it on the floor of the train and come. So in one such express tours, he found after he left Delhi for about an hour or so that the checker, the train ticket examiner was kind enough to give him, seat him beside another RAC holder. And as the train was approaching a particular station in one of our neighboring states, there was a person, a bit sturdy looking, started saying that get up, we have to take the bed cover, the bedrolls, the pillow and the blanket. So what was it? Why? Well, this is required because some important person was traveling in that compartment and his aides were collecting all these things for free distribution to the constituency. Now, this is where an example of power tends to corrupt. Just because I have that power of giving something doesn't mean I take the railway property and distribute it to the constituents. Earlier days, we used to find in local trains, just beside that not ever cleaned fan, which was only when it was replaced, it was cleansed. Once it is installed, it was never cleansed. The words were written that rail apnar jatiyo sampatti, it is a national property. And somebody used to take it up and say, sampatti bujhiya pailam, I have taken my share of the profit. So this is how it works. The author, just because he has the liberty, he has the freedom to stand up on the bench and the reserve seat, whatever be, and his hand could reach the fan, so he is taking that. I read a short story in the 70s, must have most of it, by Bimal Kaur. There it says that there was a doctor who had a very wide practice and following, and he was charging in those days ₹4 per patient. Suddenly his fee went up after 15th August 1947. He raised it to 12 rupees. So people started asking him, why have you done that? He said, so far we are not independent. Now that I'm independent, I can be independent to raise my fee. So it is trebled. Now it is a hilarious part. But if you look at it deeply, it is also another way that he is using his superiority of knowledge. That is where, in authoritarian context, where control lies with a few, just because he has this expertise, he is making good use of it. So this is where we have to be very careful, that accountability factor, which again is brought into the fore by the Right to Information Act 2005. The Citizens Charter ensures that these things have to be right. Although the bureaucracy has somehow found some measures to stall or rather to delay. In fact, when this Lokpal and Lokayukt Act was being envisaged, some of the states, including ours, had to give wakalatnama, had to give an undertaking to the Supreme Court that this will be done within such and such period of time. Now, why this? It is an administrative procedure. It has been passed in the parliament. The parliament is the representative of the people. We call it the election to the house of people, where it has been decided that there will be a lokpal at the central level and there will be a lokayut in each provincial level. Now, why the dilatory tactics? Because again, you cannot blame also the perception of intimidation, because everybody, the way the people with authority stalk the society. I'm deliberately using the word stalk because we always try to see the nuisance value which is making us more important. It is not these days when somebody is very polite or somebody is gentle, it is perceived as a sign of weakness. Just because somebody is kind to you, is nice to you, doesn't mean that he is infirm. You can be firm, yet you can be polite, or the other way around. You can be polite, but you does not mean that the person is infirm. But the general perception is that he's being so kind, he's being so nice to you because he doesn't have the power. Now, what is this power? This power is the power of doing harm, this power of doing ill, and that is corruption as well, because it is an impairment of that which is correct. And very recently, when it was decided by the Supreme Court that you have a separate court to try the representatives of the Legislative Assembly and the Parliament, there was a timeline set that unless and until within this time frame, from their past experience of the Lokpal and Lokayuk, they set a timeline. And even then also, very many states, they were declining. So, to set an example, some of the courts who took the directive of the Supreme Court by heart, they designated a particular building and said that this is the court where we will do this thing. And that was cited as an example to the other states who are not following. The funny part of it is, these states have already taken the money, the allocation that was being made to put up these courts, but they were not implementing it. They had the money with them when there was a cross check that whether you have the funds to put up these courts. They said, yes, we have the funds. Then why are you not doing it? No, it will bring trouble. What trouble? That is not specified. So lack of knowledge, absence of knowledge also tends you to become corrupt, because knowingly or unwittingly or perhaps deliberately, you are not doing what you are supposed to do. And nowadays, with the initiatives of e-governance all around, some people are very much in trouble, because we also had such experience, some of you may also have it, that when something is not very to the taste of your superior, the note sheet is not found, the file is not found. But now when everything in the e-office is in the cloud, it will rain. Be very careful. So those who were in the habit of doing away with paperwork cannot do it now. So this is a very important check. And education is another tool. Spread of knowledge is another tool. As Ben Kingsley in one of his films said, information is power, knowledge is power. So the more you make people aware, and how can you impart knowledge? It is through accountability. It is not like that proverbial tortoise of Malaysia who tried to put all the bags of knowledge on the topmost branch of the tree. And the paradox is that the branch could not carry the weight of the knowledge, and it fell down. And so knowledge spread everywhere. So you impart knowledge and you see how it works, because not always that corporal knowledge or education, as we say, Rabindranath Tagore put it in a very nice way that Shobhota, civilization, is not Shobhota in as such, it is more Sadachar. how I carry myself, how we carry ourselves, that is more a civilized man. I mean, you need not be educated person per se, in a common perception. You need not. The other day, only yesterday, we were talking in our office, we are discussing that even the tribals and the downtrodden or the backward classes of the society, the high value they attach to honesty, integrity. They may not be fed for many a days, but their principle of honesty, but their principle of integrity, and the way they abhor dishonesty is something for us to learn, to emulate, and to inculcate. We have to learn from them. So in that way, spread of knowledge, spread of education is really of importance. And just a very loose translation from Tagore, that is, we all read, perhaps most of us have read Rajarshi, where the king of Tripura, he abducts and then goes into a celibacy, life of celibacy, sort of. And there, what was his reaction when he was moving into the villages and it came dawn to him? Before that, I would just like to touch upon another point which I noted down, is the vicious circle of corruption. We had earlier the vicious circle of poverty. Now you have another challenge to the society, is the vicious circle of corruption. Because wherever there is abuse of power, there is abuse of authority, there is abuse of human rights. Free movement. Lord Chaitanya had told when he was faced with the dictum of Jagai and Madhai, the local Kshatraps, the local rulers, that he cannot bring out a procession. So they said that the power of the authority, Raj Shakti, is against you. And Chaitanya retorted, I have the people with me. Jana Shakti is with me. So that is where Karl Marx said that India is a fertile ground for revolution, because it emanates from the 16th century. The Bhakti movement as such, if you see to it, was actually a movement against corruption. The bigotry that infested the society. These people, these reformers came out of that shackle and they got merged into the people, took the people with them, took them in their confidence, and that is how it spread all over the country. And that was a movement of the people. So wherever there is abuse of human rights, there is corruption. And abuse of human rights directly leads to a decline of our democratic value. Decline of democracy occurs. And wherever there is democracy decline, there is corruption. Because when many people are not sharing the thought, when the thought process and the implementation of it is ruled by a few, there is corruption, there is abuse, there is decay. And I think I have bored you a lot, so I will not linger that. This is a very loose translation. I'll first read the loose translation, then I'll come to the original part of it. To leave kingship and become indifferent to it is easy to write, but hard to achieve in life. It is easier to leave the kingdom, but difficult to do away with the small habits with which one has grown up. These day-to-day attachments and cravings are so entangled to our flesh and bones that unless they are fed regularly, they will continue to siphon off our blood. So this is the individual perception of corruption. Once an individual gets used to the trappings with which he had exercised authority while he was in service or while he was in power, once he is out of it, he thinks that he's still ruling. He's still that same person, but it's not. So reality is different. I'll just come to the original part of it and then I'll conclude. সহসা রাজত্ব ছাড়িয়া দিয়া উদাসীন হওয়া লেখায় যতটা সহজ, বাস্তবিক ততটা সহজ নয়। বরঞ্চ রাজ্য পরিত্যাগ করা সহজ, কিন্তু আমাদের আজন্মকালের ছোট ছোট অভ্যাস আমরা অনায়াসে ছাড়িতে পারি না। তাহারা তাহাদের তীব্র ক্ষুধা তৃষ্ণা লইয়া আমাদের অস্থি মাংসের সহিত লিপ্ত হইয়া থাকে। তাহাদিগকে নিয়মিত খোরাক না যোগাইলে তাহারা আমাদের রক্ত শোষণ করিতে থাকে। So while we were talking about the institutional part of corruption and vigilance, we also have to be self-vigilant. We also have to keep vigilance upon ourselves, that whether I'm overstepping the limit of the authority, patriarch of the society, of the family, there also you have to exercise checks and balances. How much the authority should go, this much and not further. That is something which you have to inculcate. We have to regulate ourselves accordingly. And then at least, if not a corruption-free society, at least a society with less and lesser corruption. That is how we have to. Our provisions are more than enough. The government provisions that are there in place are just more than enough. Only what you need is the will to exercise them and a transparent way of sharing it. We always keep knowledge to ourselves because we feel that once we share the knowledge, we become powerless. No, rather reversely, you become more powerful. You become more accepted. You become someone to whom people will look up for guidance, for knowledge. Thank you very much for bearing me out.
Thank you so much, sir, for this wonderful work. I would now request our dignitaries to please come here because we have reached the interactive session. Yes.
Vigilance officials would be
The mic is now open to all and feel free to ask any questions to our guests related to vigilance. Keep them only related to vigilance. Yes, please.
And role of vigilance officer. If the vigilance complaint is pending for a unreasonable period and is not exposed as per CBC circular number 14/07/2022, dated 25 July 2022, and is not arrived at a logical conclusion as per the complaint handling guidelines of CBC. My second question is there any vigilance angle if a person with third division is promoted as a professor in an organization of national importance and subsequently creating pressure for HAG scale, thereby dilating the official works committing ultra-virus act? If yes, then why? My third question is, what is the procedure for complaint handling mechanism where the allegations are of administrative nature, such as relating to transfer, promotion, recruitment, suspension? And can the names and address of the complainant be shared with the alleged person in case of non-PI, DPI complaint? Thank you.
I come to the first part that gentlemen, yes, please take your seat. Your first part I will try to answer. That is months ago, previously, as far as Departmental Proceedings Act 1973, previously the article of charges had to be proven, and thereafter the person had to be charged. Now there is a provision that you have to dispose it of within 180. And if you are not able to, suppose if the proceeding is going on, and after 3 or 4 months you find that it cannot be completed within 180, then it is your duty to inform the appointing authority as well as to the delinquent that it will not be completed within 180 days, you need more time. And only when the authority grants you that time, can you take extension, otherwise you have to conclude it within 180 days. There is no further movement.
So, sir, for the date of making the complaint,
But the date of the article of charges is served upon him, and he pleads for to be heard.
actually, I want to know that the time limit for starting of the case, receiving the complaint and the
180 days. 180.
180 days. So if within 180 days, the case is not completed or reached to a logical conclusion, can that person get an vigilance clearance certificate?
No, he has to be, the inquiry authority is bound to complete it within 180 days.
No, my question is, to some reason, some unavoidable.
No, that he has to intimate. If the inquiry authority suppose is faced with some unavoidable circumstances, maybe he is called up for an election within some part of the country, he cannot complete. Then it falls upon the disciplinary authority to have a substitute, or to say that yes, 120 days or 90 days are done. Now, you see, this is also being made for these big cases of arbitration, where this National Green Tribunal and other tribunals are involved. There also now there is a time frame that unless and until the award is given within a particular time frame, either you stay with the previous order, the award that has already been granted to you, which is being challenged, or you complete it within the set period of time. There is no going out.
Thank you.
And second question that
My second
that
question.
class somebody got
Vigilance angle. My second question is relating to vigilance angle. If a person having third division in
that
company
is something.
is promoted as a professor and thereafter demanding for HAG skill, creating and delaying the official activities and thereby doing ultra vires act, is there any vigilance angle? And if yes, how and why?
If it is in an institution, then the institutional guidelines have to be followed. If the institutional guidelines are silent about this, then I think you have a hard task ahead. Otherwise, I think most of the institutions, they have their rules and procedures. If there is a violation of that, it can be caught at some level of it. You cannot go away.
I think administrative.
Like I said, that at a point of time, there was a perception that the Supreme Court judges are beyond law. But after these two cases where they were brought before the parliament and impeachment proceedings started, now things are much more realistic. And in the lower courts, you have hundreds of instances where dereliction of duty has been taken very, very seriously.
Yes, that's why I am saying that is there any vigilance angle? Is there loss to the government?
It is more to the institution where this aberration has taken.
Right. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
And the third question,
Third question is that what is the procedure for complaint handling mechanism when the allegations are of purely administrative nature, such as relating to transfer, promotion, recruitment, suspension, and whether the name of the person or complainant can be shared with the alleged person in case of non-PI DPI complaint.
no, in departmental proceedings, you have to share the information. There is no other way. And also, these cases of transfer, I think this is becoming a monopoly. Once again, that is a corruption. So, in cases of transfer or promotion or something of that sort, they are guided by the service rules, which Professor Desai had mentioned. The service rules are enough. Service rules and service conduct rules. If there is anything other than that,
Right.
then obviously the person has every reason to appeal before the authority, and also to, if it's a state government employee, he can approach the administrative tribunal of the state. If it's a central government employee, he or she will move the central administrative tribunal. If anything other than what is provided in the service rules or service conduct rules has been exercised upon.
So, sir, the name of the person,
Yeah, that is there.
that can be shared with the other person.
Yeah, obviously, because in the departmental proceedings, when it happens, both are made to sit side by side.
Right, right. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much.
And I, for an example, for just an addition to their information, there have been several persons who have worked in the Vigilance Commission, both central. The CVC came in 1964 as early as that. And the our state Vigilance Commission was formed in 1965. Now, there is definite tenure for the commission. In 8 of the 10 cases which come before the commission, the secretaries have been very candid about it, are mostly this, mainly out of drugs or out of some sort of that they can know.
Right.
Okay, I cannot do it. State level, I complain to the. Or sometimes আপনি জানেন আপনি কার সাথে কথা বলছেন।
Any other questions?
Is there any other question?
আমি একটা কথা বলছি ছিল we are speaking Bengal.
Yeah.
আপনারা actually we are observing the day as a Vigilance Awareness Week. There is a mention at the Bhroshtrachar book. I last 31st October in our department, special word called like this Vigilance Awareness Day, and my head told me that a writer should have to be made by you, and it will be sent to the appropriate authority. When I made this writer, everybody noted, and what I have written just now I am telling here. After independence, corruption has been deeply rooted in every space of our country, and resulted all resources have been consolidated. Only 2 to 3% people of our country like India, a place where everyone works hard and gets what he deserves, a place that gives equal opportunity to everyone based on their knowledge and skill, irrespective of their caste, color, creeds, or religion. A place where people do not use other people around to get accomplices their selfish motives. But alas, India is far from the ideal place I imagine to be. Everyone is so engrossed in earning money and enhancing their lifestyle that they do not mind using corrupt ways to fulfill their dreams and ambitions. It is a common notion that those who work with honesty cannot reach anywhere. They hardly get any promotions and continue to earn bigger salaries. On the other hand, those who seek bribes and use unfair means to accomplish their task climb up the ladder of success and make a better living. It must be understood that although using corrupt ways in an easy way to make money in most cases, it does not make you happy. You may do well monetarily using such ill practices, but will you ever get peace of mind? No. You may find temporary happiness, but you will stay dissatisfied and unhappy in the long run. Suppose each one of us must take a pledge to lead Quran practices. This way our life will improve and our country will become much better. But our head is telling me that it cannot be sent to the Vigilance website. I asked him why. He can't say that this cannot give to the appropriate authority. So I am asking you, this write-up is whether if you want to get this like the Bhrashtachaar book also. So is it possible to can send it to the Vigilance Awareness Week to the appropriate level? Whereas the government in different times, different times or sessions, they have amendment the PMLA Act. Now it is introducing in everywhere by the ED and the CBI. So this type of PMLA, Prevention of Money Laundering Act, can be used in the government officials also. This is my question.
I remember you said that you used to speak in He answered. No, actually, you see, when you are working under an institution, you are guided by the rules and regulations of the institution. Your personal perception may be quite different. Now, if the authority is allowing you to air your personal perception, the funny part of the Transparency International or the Corruption Perception Index is that they do not cover money. One of the things which are not covered, that also does not take into account private corruption or corruption in private work. This is where CPI lacks as is perceived, that these are because corruption in the private sector also attributes to the downfall of the nation. It's not always, though the CBC was constituted to check governmental corruption. Yet, you cannot say that the private sector is also out of this corruption free or beyond the bounds of corruption. It's not that. There are corruption in the society, and it is affecting both the private and the public. But whether your article could be sent to the Central Vigilance website, if your service conduct allows it, it's fine. If it does not, then when what we do in government, when there is a grievance against some posting or some transfer, etc., and the family gets affected, sometimes we advise one of the members of the family to write to the appropriate. Now, suppose if the person, if I am getting transferred, my spouse can approach the higher, if I may not. So that is an alternative through which you can air your personal perceptions. But, and also if your authority allows, those who are in the, those who are holding the power to have things published or not published. If they publish it, fine. Well and good. If they do not, at least you have aired your sentence.
Actually, I am telling you that we are actually observing the day for the period of time 31st of November. The government last government is called us to observe the 75 years of Ambedkar Mahotsav. It is not. We are in the outside. We are always observing the like Nobel person.
No, you see that
Actually, what we want to do, either we are want to the Bhrashtachaar to follow. What is our partners that?
Yeah, that I agree to an extent. But you see, in day-to-day life, also we do not follow.
Yeah.
Like when in day-to-day life, when we observe 25 Boishakh with much fanfare, you see, on 26 Boishakh, we forget to take out the garland from the statue.
Yeah.
That garland is on Vaishisam. So Vaishisam is on the and Vaishisam we have a garland, And that is replaced on the next position.
If our perception is the ভ্রষ্টাচার মুক্ত ভারতবর্ষ, তো আমাদের এই পারসেপশনটা এটাই হওয়া দরকার যে আমরা ফরম্যাটকে এটা বোঝাতে চাইছি যে আমরা সত্যি করে তুমি কি করতে চাই। তাই আমরা বলে চলে
আমরা আড়ম্বর করি অনুষ্ঠান করি, আমরা আড়ম্বর করি অনুষ্ঠান করি না, আড়ম্বর করি শেষ করি। We begin, we do not end. There is much sensation when something happens, when Virat Kohli's hotel room is brought to the fore. But what the pain and the anguish that he is suffering, unless and until he voices out, we do not understand. This is where you see the lack of knowledge is a very important part. It is very important. And the perception, how you look at it. Always that what Laurence Olivier, great actor, he said that whenever you enact, you get under the skin of the cat. That if you had been Othello, how would you have been? Then that will bring the best out. So we always, once we are saying that the authority is not doing this, we also should sometimes place ourselves in the place of the authority and see how is it from the other side of the table. So that way perceptions gets more balanced.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
I will give you just for the thank you. But I appreciate your way of looking at it. But in most of going on in day-to-day life, it is also something like this.
But one thing maybe, because we are having, I hope this is an informal discussion. It's not a minuted meeting, so I agree. But also this perception of people who are moving up the ladder are all corrupt. And those who are not being able to move up are all honest. This perception is also very wrong. So that also needs to change. That there are many, many people who are moving up the ladder by the dint of their quality, of their perseverance, of their commitment. And there are many people who have not been able to do that, also because they're not persevered enough. They've not put in that much of effort. And of course, there's luck. One has to be fortunate also to be born in a particular family, under particular situations. I tell it in many of my convocation speeches when I'm telling to the students that today you are getting your degrees. You must be thankful that you are so fortunate that you were born into a particular family, under particular situations, which has enabled you to get this degree today. There are millions of people who did not have that fortune. So look after them when you can. So, but it's not when they grow, move up. It's all through corruption. Maybe there is a small percentage. I would say a small percentage. Otherwise, if it were all corruption, this country would not have existed. It would not have existed.
No, actually, problem is
Maximum percentage.
It's all.
I am telling you not, I have not make any controversy. I am telling you the society runs on the basis of the patterning is the criteria to become the ladder to high ladder. Patterning is the criteria.
So,
Non any.
No, there is
Like the education and other components, they don't actually follow.
but I think
It is in the outside our institution and all over our society, pattern is the criteria to become the high area.
This perception is there. There is another perception you should also appreciate. And still today, the problem lies elsewhere. You see, even now, we believe that out of 10 people, most are good, few are bad. But what happens is, what is dangerous for the society is that if 2 are bad, at least 3 or 4 are afraid of it. Now, there is a slope of channel curve, which translated, loosely translated like this, that if an honest person becomes fearful of the wrong, then it is practice. This is a crisis which we are all in. Some people in your society, in your area, locality, there are hooligans are very few. that booking window, breaking the window concept, it may be done by a few, but others are not coming into the forefront, lest some harm comes to them. Now, as long as this fear perception is there, and you are not coming out, then it is.
No, generally we avoid the person those who are having high nuisance value. High in office culture, we generally train to avoid. Okay, to have nothing. And it is a common perception in office.
Yes, we try to avoid. Actually, आपने देखो ना, in a crowded place, if you take the photograph from outside, or movie camera, drone view, प्रत्येक किन्तु प्रत्येक avoid करते हैं. We all try to avoid each other. We don't want to come into contact. We always try to avoid, no matter how crowded it is. Yeah. No, back to you.
Okay. This is not under the purview of ISI. So, what would happen if a person gets a false criminal case, okay, and he's suffering, he's being harassed by the police authority? Where should he complain? What is the vigilance angle of this? Means police authority intentionally, for some reason, is harassing people by lodging false criminal case.
That comes more under the purview of the human rights. It's more under the human rights, violation of human rights, because the courts and the law enforcement authorities have been very particular over the years. Now, previously there used to be no time frame, no as such strict guidelines. Now, if you have to arrest somebody, you have to carry this warrant of arrest. It has to be supported. You have to keep witnesses and their presence has to be recorded. Not that everything is going by the book, but previously we did not have the book.
No,
Now we have
it is actually given by the books only.
No.
Human rights means the person has approached the Human Rights Commission, person have approached the Home Secretary of the state. Okay, so nothing happened. Home Secretary being the means top post, means the top boss of the police authority. I understand if I'm not wrong. So Home Secretary or Home Minister. So means nothing happened. It means then what would be the way? Means our judiciary system is taking so much time, and the police authority and the complainant is taking advantage of this. That the person will be harassed for a quite prolonged period of time for some reason, for some other reason.
No, these aberrations are there, but you see, one basic concept is that if nowadays, you see 10 years or 15 years from now, you did not know how many cases are there in the High Court also. Now you have it digital. You know which cases coming there. Or even in lower courts, now that is also getting digital. Because everybody should know what is happening where. Once these things are streamlined, these harassments will come. Now that police authorities, sometimes they are ethics, no doubt. And they are sometimes influenced by extraneous factors. But otherwise, if they go by the book, they cannot do that. Sometimes these things have been, when we were doing magisterial course, a very thin and thin person, hardly able to stand up on his feet, was brought before us and said that he is potentially dangerous to the system. Why? He was loitering in the New Jalpaiguri district. Maybe he was loitering without food. He was in search of food. Police gets arrested because he has to fill up the numbers. But these days he has to make so many arrests. Otherwise, his performance graph is down. Now these things are getting reformed day by day. Now we cannot do that.
This is happening.
But it's happening.
My question is whether there is a vigilance angle or some vigilance authority where we can complain against the police authority, some police personnel.
Police also have their vigilance department. They also have their vigilance team. But the particular case about which you were discussing, it comes more under the violation of human.
And also there's the Vigilance portal.
Vigilance portal is there. Actually, nowadays, but I have also seen results happening because in Kolkata police, in the jurisdiction of Kolkata police, each and every police station, they have got a mail ID. So if you do not want to travel by yourself to the police station, you can mail it, and the automatically that copy, the soft copy, is transferred to the portal of the deputy commissioner and the joint. So I have had instances where the people got the ring from Lal Bazar rather than the local police station. Lal Bazar rang up the person and said,
Also,
"Can you the other side of the story?" I appreciate.
so
But-
higher authority like commissioner of police, commissioner, everybody knows, everybody was informed, but nothing happened.
Then I think you
Means several times,
then you can also approach the information. That is also there.
information commission for which information? So that is the
No,
RTI issue.
if you have a particular grievance against some authority, government officer, and it is getting unanswered, then information commission could be approached. That I have approached this authority, I have wanted this information, and it has not been.
No, he's not talking about information.
I'm not talking about the information. So that is the RTI issue. I
Does-
Talking of sheer harassment.
Harassment sometimes you see, it is that they can have a concept works more.
Yes, that
But
happened.
if
Actually,
it is-
that happened.
Sometimes if it is brought to book, sometimes the actions are taken. Not that the actions are taken 100 out of 100 cases, but things are gradually moving. Transform. I would say moving.
Maybe Kolkata police is little more active, but the other which are not are under Kolkata police.
On the other point of view, you see that.
For example, Vidhannagar police commissioner, it is not done.
That is, now things are somewhat under control. Because what was reported. and
I mean, that is the reason why that chill went down in
Yeah,
your spine.
yeah.
That people don't
That
want to get into
intimidating-
these troubles because it's so, nothing happens often, like what you are.
Otherwise, that cover wouldn't have been. Police today are. That cover wouldn't have been.
If everything was fair, so we have a lot of rules, but implementation is poor.
Implementation,
Implementation is poor. Rules are better.
theoretically,
Theoretically is there, but so
implementation is.
very, very,
Very,
very.
Otherwise, we have been loyal, lingering in this 80th position for 10 years.
In spite of all these rules and all the
All these e-governance
instruments and
initiatives, governance initiatives have been very aggressive for the last few years. But that doesn't move us. Even some of the state governments have made certain provisions where in the transfer of land, you don't have to go to the office. It is done electronically. The cash is transferred electronically. Even in the corporation, Calcutta corporation areas, nowadays mutation and such things are also being done electronically. That is curb corruption to an extent. But there are milestones. It has to be.
Very example is RTO office. Anyhow, we have to pay.
But now renewal, previously renewal was a very major issue. Now renewal aspects are being taken up electronically. You can move forward.
We can take one more.
But miles to buy, I admit miles to.
Take question asking.
Okay.
একটা কোশ্চেন আপনাকে যেটা ওনাকে বলছি যে আমরা জানি যে আইনের প্রথম যেটা প্রিয়াম্বলে যে বিষয়টা আছে সেটা আইন মানুষের মঙ্গল বা কল্যাণের জন্য। আমি আমার ইনস্টিটিউটে ফিরে আসছি সেই ধারণা ধরেই, ধরুন আমাদের ইনস্টিটিউটে রিক্রুটমেন্ট হয়েছে, সেই রিক্রুটমেন্টে প্রায় 3.5 বছর পার হয়েছে। তো প্রসিডিউরের কাজ করতে গেলে প্রবলেম হয়, এটা আমরা জানি, সোসাইটিতে সবার ক্ষেত্রেই পারে বিষয়টার উপর। আইনের যে জায়গা যে আছে জুডিশিয়াল সিস্টেমের মধ্যে যে সিস্টেমটা আছে, কিছু মানুষ অ্যাকুইজ থাকতেই পারে, প্রিন্সিপাল অ্যাকুইজ, কিছু মানুষ ডিফেন্ড অ্যাকুইজ, এই ধরনের বিষয় থাকতে পারে। কিন্তু দেখা গেছে যে যারা আইন মানুষের মঙ্গল বা কল্যাণের জন্য যারা রিক্রুটমেন্ট করল এই ধরনের 3.5 বছর পর হয়ে গেল, মানে আপনার ভাষায় আগে বলছিলেন অনেক কেসের মধ্যে কিছু একটা জানা উচিত, ফিডব্যাক পাওয়া উচিত। যারা রিক্রুটমেন্ট হলো তারা থ্রি টায়ার সিস্টেমের মধ্যে দিয়ে এলো, তাদের ফেস সিস্টেমের মধ্যে তারা আছে, তাদের কোনো অ্যাকুইজ নয় তারা আজ পর্যন্ত, বা লিগ অ্যাকুইজ নয়, কিন্তু আজ পর্যন্ত তারা সাফার হচ্ছে ভিজিলেন্স সংক্রান্ত কেসে, তাদের কনফার্মেশন গুলো আজ পর্যন্ত
as per আমাদের এসে সার্ভিস কন্ডিশন স্টুডেন্ট সার্ভিস কন্ডিশন মোতাবেক নিয়মে আছে যে 365 ডেজ এর পর তারা যদি কোনো অ্যাডভান্স রিপোর্ট না থাকলে তারা কনফার্মেশন পাবে। as per DOBT নবধি আছে সেখানে ম্যাক্সিমাম 2 ইয়ার্স 2 বছর পরে তারা কনফার্মেশন পাবে, কিন্তু প্রায় 3.5 বছর অতিক্রান্ত হওয়ার পরও তারা কনফার্মেশনটা পাচ্ছে না। ভিজিলেন্স অ্যাঙ্গেল কেসে তারা সেই কেসটা ক্লিয়ার হয়নি বলে তাদের দেওয়া হচ্ছে। মানে আইন মানুষের যদি মঙ্গলের হয়, বিদেশ মানুষ সোসাইটিকে করাপশন মুক্ত করার যে দৃষ্টিভঙ্গি, দেখা যাচ্ছে এই আইনের জন্যই কিছু যারা ভিক্টিমাইজ হচ্ছে, একটা কোশ্চেন যারা অ্যাকুইজ নয়, যারা ফেস এবং তার ফেস ব্লাড এই সময় সোসাইটি তারা অনেক কিছু দেওয়ার ব্যাপার আছে। এই জায়গায় ক্লিয়ার পরিষ্কার থাকে। এই জায়গায় আমাদের ধরো যে স্টুডেন্ট নবস আছে, পিছিয়ে একজন আছে বিজনেস সম্পর্কে ব্যাপারে, বা চিফ আছে, যিনি ডিরেক্টর আছে, এদের তাদের কি রোল হওয়া উচিত, বা এরাই এদের ভিক্টিমাইজ হচ্ছে। এটা প্রশ্ন। সেকেন্ড প্রশ্ন, ধরুন কারণ নামে ভিজিলেন্স হয়ে আছে, সেই ওই পদটা ভিজিলেন্স অলঙ্কৃত করে আছে, তার এগেইনস্টে ভিজিলেন্স হয়ে আছে, করে সে বিভিন্ন জায়গায় করছে, অফিসার হিসেবে অ্যাক্ট করছে। যে অফিসার হিসেবে অ্যাক্ট করছে তার নামে ভিজিলেন্স, সেই ওই পদটা থেকে অন্যান্য বিভিন্ন কাজকর্ম করবে, ফাইলপত্র তার কাছেই সমস্ত থাকবে। পসিবল যে তাকে ওই জায়গায় রেখে তার এগেইনস্টে চার্জ পেমেন্ট করা, তার থেকে করা, তাদের পদটা পাওয়ার ক্ষেত্রেই তো ভিজিলেন্স হয়ে যাচ্ছে। তবুও তাকে পদটা পদে রেখে দিয়ে কাজ চালিয়ে তার এগেইনস্টে চার্জ পে করছে, ফলে ডিলে প্রসেস হচ্ছে এবং তার সেও এক্সট্রা প্রায়োরিটি পেয়ে যাচ্ছে, তাকে নিজেকে প্রোটেক্ট করার জন্য। এটা ভিজিলেন্স অ্যাঙ্গেল কি সঠিক না?
ঠিক আছে, আমি কি উত্তরটা বাংলায় দেবো? প্রথম যে প্রশ্নটা, যে 3.5 বছর ধরে কেউ কাউকে যেতে রাখা হয়েছে, কনফার্ম করা হচ্ছে না, সেটা আমরা যদি ডিওপিটি আইন দেখি তাহলে সেটা আইন মোতাবেক হয়। যতই ভিজিলেন্স থাকে না কেন, তোমাকে উইদিন দ্যাট পিরিয়ড তোমাকে একটা ডিসিশন নিতেই হবে, যেটা উনিও বললেন। একটা পার্টিকুলার পিরিয়ড থেকে তুমি ইনডেফিনিট পিরিয়ডের জন্য কাউকে ফেলে রাখতে পারো। যদি কেউ ফেলে রাখে, তুমি পিটিভির কথা বললে, আপনি পিটিভির কথা বললেন, সেই হিসাবে বলি আমি কিন্তু যখন কমপ্লেনটা পেয়েছিলাম, উইদিন আমি 90 ডেজ এর মধ্যে কিন্তু আমার রিপোর্ট জমা। যদিও সাবমিট করার ক্ষেত্রে অনেকগুলো ফ্যাক্টর কাজ করে। First factor is I have to have some information from the administration. If the administration of the information not there, the report will be different. That's the simple. Kind of report I needed more para banate pari. There will be some base, but a base as guy, whatever the case may be, I have submitted the report within the period. Okay. Even যেহেতু আমার পজিশন থেকে পিটিভি, vigilance officer, not CBO, part-time, and we are under the CBO of Moscow. So my role is to forward the report after getting the views of the director to the CBO. CBO ke pathano hoye geche. Now this is the ball is in the court of the CBO. CBO ki korbe, that's up to CBO and ministry. So ekhane amader ar kono role thake na, eta prothom. দ্বিতীয়ত, কিন্তু নিয়ম অনুযায়ী উইদিন 180 ডেজ এর মধ্যে ইট শুড বি রিসলভ। কেন হয়নি, কি কারণে হয়নি, সেটা তাহলে যদি কোর্টে গেলে পরে সেটাতে ইনস্টিটিউটের কোনো রোল নেই। রোলটা পুরোপুরি যিনি ইম্পোজ করছেন, যিনি ওদেরকে করতে দিচ্ছেন না, তাদের উপরে রোল। That is the CBO of the ministry. So we have
এই জন্যই আমি বলছিলাম যে ইনস্টিটিউটের একজন পার্ট-টাইম হলেও সিবিও থাকে, হ্যাঁ, তাহলে এটা একটু ফাস্ট, মানে ইট ক্যান বি এক্সপেডিটেড। দ্যাট ইজ দ্য অনলি রিজন। বাট
আপনি বলছেন ইনস্টিটিউট কি বলছেন?
হ্যাঁ, না না, সেটাই বলছি যে ইনস্টিটিউটের সিবিও থাকলে ইট ইজ one step less because it goes to the CBO of Moscow. They have hundreds of questions, they revert back. That has to be answered. It goes up back and forth.
Then from there, so
পার্টিকুলারলি আমি এই ইস্যুতে বলতে পারি 2019 এই কেসটা লঞ্চ হয়েছিল অর ইট ওয়াজ ফরওয়ার্ডেড টু মি আমি উইদিন দ্যাট পিরিয়ড আমি জমা দিয়েছিলাম তখনকার যিনি সিবিও ছিলেন উনি 2021 এর মার্চ অবধি মিনিস্ট্রিতে ফেলে রেখে গেছেন 2022 এর মার্চ অবধি যা আর নো this is the fact I am not in the fact আমরা always
general questions. We are getting into details which they do not know the details. How can they answer such questions?
Now, actually, our question is how soon it will be continued.
By rule 180.
ডিপার্টমেন্টাল প্রসিডিংস হয়
The departmental proceedings to হবে after vigilance is approved. তারপরে তো disciplinary proceedings যাবে তার আগেই তো অনেকটা টাইম নিয়ে নেয়
না সেটাই বলেন কি এখন ইভেন আপনার যে অ্যানুয়াল পারফরম্যান্স রিপোর্ট যেটা পার্সোনাল সেখানে আপনার বাধা ধরা থাকে
হ্যাঁ
এভরিথিং ইজ নাও আন্ডার কন্ট্রোল বিকজ ধরুন আমি রিপোর্টিং অফিসার আপনি অফিসার রিপোর্টে রাখুন আপনি নির্দিষ্ট টাইমে আমাকে পাঠিয়ে দিন আপনার বছরের আমার টাইম ফ্রেম আছে 31 অক্টোবর আমি যদি 31 অক্টোবরের মধ্যে না করি এটা অটোমেটিক্যালি রিভিউইং অফিসারের কাছে চলে যাবে এন্ড আই উইল বি বুকড যে হচ্ছে এর কাছে 16 জনের কেস এসেছিল 15টা ফেলে রেখেছে নেক্সট টাইম আই উইল বি আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ড
also these things are happening to keep digitally upload. So I think we should immediately try for C of this.
You are keeping a hard copy to yourself. But anybody who is in the system,
File move করবে
it is only unless and until you be accepting of the is an elected minister or someone else, then you have to create this down. Because he or she may not be.
No, but here we have several cases where the reportee himself refuses to write his APR. He clearly writes a letter to the reporting officer that I will not write whatever.
No,
I don't know what happened.
No, this has been playing in the institution for a long time. Now what has
No, we have recently started APR. We didn't
APR
have
is
any
not
APR.
web actually. So our systems are very ad hoc.
Okay.
Slowly processes are getting streamlined.
Now, what we have in the administrative system is that somebody, previously it used to happen, somebody who is a collector in Burdwan gets transferred to a post in government of India. And he keeps pending, all ACRs are pending. That time government came out with a provision that his successor, whoever succeeds that person should write. Sometimes that also did not used to happen.
No, but if the person is not working under him or he doesn't know that person, how can he report?
No, you can take the feedback from the predecessor. Take the feedback from the predecessor, complete it. Our principle is that you do whatever is done, is to be done by you within that time. Don't keep it pending.
Is it legal that we also have a glaring example of this? Our previous administrative head, he was about to report about some officers, but he left anyhow, and a new officer has come. He has joined after that period of APR reporting. Can he act as a reporting officer of those officers?
No, in that case, what happens in our system, I tell you, suppose you are the officer reporter. You send it to me, I am the reporting officer, I keep now, I do nothing. So after 2 months, it flows to the reading. He does nothing. It goes to the accepting authority, she does nothing. So whatever you have reported in your own assessment, that will be recorded and it will go for the next year.
Okay.
How
So
the
there is a-
reporting officer and review officer are fixed.
That is also a question.
No, in certain cases, which is in the hierarchy is not very much defined, then either of them can be dispensed with. Like if somebody is working as a private secretary to a minister, in that case, his or her reporting, reviewing and accepting authority is the minister himself office. It does not go to the departmental secretary. So in that case, if you go strictly by the hierarchy, then the reporting and the reviewing authorities are dispensed.
So they need not be distinct. They need not be distinct.
Like our district. So we have a pan India centers, and we have different centers in Delhi, Bangalore, H2. So suppose that someone is posted in Bangalore or Delhi, a position, right? There is no higher position related to that person. Suppose the engineer, there is no senior engineer in the Bangalore, but he reports the his work or her work directly to the senior engineer to Kolkata.
The head of center is there.
Head of center is but field expert who is finding the job to him is the senior engineer from Kolkata. Or say in the case of library, say deputy librarian from Kolkata to give some assignment to the library personal to the textbook. Right? So in that case, who will be the reporting authority and who will be the reviewing? That confusion is there.
Well, that hierarchy is set by the department or the ministry itself, depending upon the nature and the organizational structure. Like in our case, in some departments, you see when the department of ministry is there, and officers holding rank senior to the joint secretary. That in that case, the reviewing authority is the chief secretary. So what the chief secretary does, he sends it back to the ministry. And it is not done.
As you said, the authorities need not be distinct.
Need
Need not be distinct.
It depends. Yes.
Same person can be, as well as review.
You can dispense on.
You can dispense of it. Oh, because we do that like it's a small thing. So all our promotions from assistant to associate, our reporting offices were director. No, sorry, associate what? Professor, any promotions, even faculty promotions, the director is the reporting and reviewing authority. But you have parts for the faculty of. Now this is a new thing, by the way. So this is something to know. Yeah, so for us, like my promotion was stuck because the APAs of the federal government decided that even faculty need APAs of every year. Government decided. Yeah, the DBT center note that we are not going to promote her because where are the APAs? So how does DBT come to know about your promotion? Because it goes to the joint secretary into a DBT. This is a DBT institution. No, but your promotion from assistant professor to associate professor. Let's say a committee will say they will say, okay, it is approved. You can become, but we have to get it approved from the ministry now. Oh, so your promotions are approved by the ministry? For the professor level, not associate, but for the professor level. And there we need efforts.
So that means the way government is.
It is a DBT. It is not exactly now. For professor, no, but
It seems like a government part.
for professor, you have to send it to the ministry. So it came back from the ministry. So you have efforts are not there. You have a council also. You have a council of the institution, like governing council, governing board. Whatever you call it, GP. Yeah, GP. We have a GP. So your promotions. We have a FC, a GB. So your promotions, meaning faculty promotions, they go to the governing board, professor level, at professor level, they go to the governing board, and then on to the ministry. Yeah, they have to be sent to the ministry, and then it is delaying, like we all have experienced. And efforts are being insisted upon for the faculty. Yeah, and we suddenly had this because there were no efforts.
This is for all other DBT institutes.
Yeah, at least we have faced this for professor level only. That's because I
For
think
professor level.
your scale goes into that.
I think we will have a chance to discuss.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
একটা কোশ্চেন ছিল মনে হয় আপনি বললেন কিছু করার আছে তো ভিজিলেন্স রিলেটেড হলে
আমরা আশা করেছিলাম যে এই বছর ভিজিলেন্স অ্যাওয়ারনেস উইকে আমরা এই কোশ্চেন গুলো সলভ করা বা আমাদের বিপ্লব সরকার করেছিল কতবার সেম কোশ্চেন করেছিল কিন্তু কোশ্চেন গুলো সেই মানে ভাষা মানে তার একটা কমিটির সদস্য কিন্তু আমরা পাইনি যে 46 জনের বিষয়টা নিয়ে যে
তোমরা
হয়ে আছে।
তোমরা উত্তর চাওনি, তোমরা চাইছো সলিউশনটা তো আমাদের হাতে নেই।
হ্যাঁ, সলিউশন করে এই 46টা বল একবার অ্যাডমিনিস্ট্রেশনের মাঠে গিয়ে খেলবে, আরেকবার সিবিওর কাছে, একবার সিবিসির কাছে। আপনারা একটা এই যে একটা অ্যাওয়ারনেস উইক হচ্ছে, একটা আশা করেছিলাম যে আপনাদের থেকে একটা সদস্য পাবো অ্যাডমিনিস্ট্রেশনের কাছ থেকে একটা সদস্য। আরেকটা বিষয় হচ্ছে স্যারকে বলবো যে আইনসভা, ভারতবর্ষের আইনসভা পার্লামেন্টে 543 জন মেম্বার আছে, সেখানে দেখা যাচ্ছে যে
স্ট্যাটিস্টিক সেখানে 233 জন এরকম বিভিন্ন কারাপশনে তারা জড়িত আছে। না যারা আইনসভা তৈরি করছে অবাক লাগছে, তারা ভিজিলেন্স অ্যাওয়ারনেস উইকটা কিভাবে পালন করছে। তারা আমাদের উপরে আইন তৈরি করে ইম্পোজ করার চেষ্টা করছে। দেখা যাচ্ছে 233 জনের উপর বিভিন্ন ধরনের আইন আইনসভা থেকে আমরা প্রতিষ্ঠিত করার চেষ্টা করছে। This is the